Wide receiver tiers, baby. And yes, it's because he's a touchdown vulture. He limits his upside a little bit. I think Javonte and Kenneth Walker have good games. I can see that. Najee or Ford, go Najee. Go Najee. I believe Gus Edwards will shock a lot of people. Deep sleeper, potential top 20 RB. I'm not mad at that. Stream defense this week. I don't do defenses, but maybe Falcons. I don't know. I have to take a look at the defenses. I don't do defenses though. If you're looking for defenses here, I don't do defense or kickers. I'll throw a couple names your way, but I have done zero homework on that. Cincinnati, I talked about it for New England. Cincinnati sleeper defense. I think who's going up against Denver? Seattle. Seattle's probably a sleeper defense. Seattle. I think Titans might be a sleeper defense too against Caleb. Like I could see the Titans getting a pick six or something. I think Titans are kind of a sleeper defense this week. Houston, maybe. I just don't trust it against A-Rich. But Houston could be a sneaky defense this week. They're probably not out there, though. Ayuk or Shakir this week? Ayuk. Yeah, I had Rashad White over him. Rashad White, it was Mixon, Rashad White, and Cook. I had James Conner at the back end of I have him at the top end of the third tier. Odunze or Christian Kirk? Give me Kirk for the floor. Kirk for the floor. All right, wide receivers. Let's get into it. All right, so I'm going to go a little quicker through the wide receivers, all right? Because we got a lot of receivers, but I'm going to go quicker through the wide receivers. In the elite tier of wide receivers, I got 10, all right? 10 guys in the elite tier of wide receivers. We got Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Let me restart this. Tyreek against Jacksonville in a shootout. Justin Jefferson at New York. Should be a phenomenal game for him. Amon-Ra St. Brown in a shootout with the Rams. A.J. Brown against Green Bay. Jamar Chase expected to play. Well, looks like he's at practice. I don't know if it's confirmed he's going to play, but versus New England at home. We got Garrett Wilson in San Francisco. CeeDee Lamb all the way down here at Cleveland. Devontae Adams against the Chargers. Mike Evans versus the Commanders. Cooper Kupp against Detroit. And that rounds out the tier. So I think when it comes to like surprising names in this tier, the shocker is CeeDee Lamb. You drafted him as the number one wide receiver this year, and you probably took him either with your first, second, third, fourth overall pick, whatever it was. But CeeDee Lamb up against Denzel Ward this week has a tough matchup, and then his Cleveland defense shut down wide receivers last year, and it's probably going to be a similar thing. So typically I'd say CeeDee's matchup proof. That's why he's still in this tier. But I do tier him down outside of those other 5 to 6 that I mentioned because of that reason. So CeeDee Lamb to me belongs in this tier, but I do have some concern with him. He's risky, and I would have him as an elite guy, but I'm putting him down a little bit in the pecking order. Devontae Adams, for those who didn't get him as a top 7 pick, definitely belongs in this tier. He cooked the Chargers last year. Expect him to cook the division rival yet again. And then Cooper Kupp is in this tier. A lot of people would put Puka Nacua in this tier. For me, I have Cooper Kupp in this tier. I think this offense gets back to going through Cooper Kupp. And if I'm wrong, I will adjust very quickly, okay? So I'm not the kind of person to hold on to something. If I am wrong, we'll know after week 1. I will adjust accordingly. This is coming into the season. This is me projecting. This is me thinking that Cooper Kupp is the one in this offense and that Puka Nacua is going to be the 1B, but on the backside of this, okay? So that's me projecting. This is week 1. If things change, I will adjust. Just know that, okay? If you don't have Cooper Kupp that high, that is fine. These are my tiers, my rankings. This is how I got it heading into week 1. In the second tier, I got Michael Pittman up against Derek Stingley. Very tough matchup for him, but Michael Pittman in this tier, in tier 2. Jalen Waddle against Jacksonville. Chris Olave against Carolina. Tough matchup for him. Deebo Samuel against New York. Stephon Diggs against Indy. And Drake London against Pittsburgh. So in this tier are a bunch of guys that I think could be top 15 receivers, but just some tough matchups overall. You talk about Pittman. You talk about Olave, Deebo Samuel, Drake London. There's some good corners there on the other side in those matchups. So I'm anticipating these receivers are good enough to win that just don't have the ceiling of wide receiver 1 for the week. So these are my high-end wide receiver 2s, maybe back-end wide receiver 1s. Could have wide receiver 1 weeks if they win on a play or 2. That could change the outcome of their game. Otherwise, I expect them to be kind of wide receiver 2s, almost at floor. All right? In the next tier, wide receiver 3s. I got Puka Nacua at Detroit, Devontae Smith versus Green Bay, Marvin Harrison Jr. at Buffalo, Brandon Ayuk versus New York, Malik Neighbors versus Minnesota, Nico Collins at Indy, Amari Cooper versus Dallas, Chris Godwin versus Washington. All right. And so all of these guys have like wide receiver 2 potential to me. It's just there's risk, right? Like if Puka is not, if this thing does get spread out a little bit, Puka is the wide receiver 2. We got to tear him down a little bit. So he's still a top 20 play for me this week. I just have him tiered down personally. Same thing goes for Marvin Harrison. This is a player I've tiered down. If the offense doesn't go as everybody wants it to go for the entire season, like we got to give Marvin Harrison a chance to play his first NFL game before we crown him a top 10 receiver. He's at the back end of this wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 tier for me. Brandon Ayuk, tough matchup up against, he's got to have some Sauce Gardner on the other side there. And then some players I do like, Malik Neighbors, I like him a lot more than this week than I have been letting on against a bad Minnesota defense. And then Chris Godwin should have a lot of opportunity against Washington. I want to bump him up a little bit in this tier, but I respect the names that are going before him. I want to see it with Chris Godwin, and then I can start to move him up. Kind of the same thing. I want him to prove it to me before I move him up. At the back end of this wide receiver 3 tier is DJ Moore, DK Metcalf. DJ Moore, against Tennessee. DK Metcalf versus Denver. Calvin Ridley at Chicago. Rashee Rice versus Baltimore. Terry McLaurin at Tampa. George Pickens at Atlanta. Jaden Reed at Philly. T. Higgins versus New England. So it's kind of rounds out the guys that I think have wide receiver 2 potential, but either have a bad matchup or just something else, another reason for me to kind of err on the side of caution, right? Like DK Metcalf up against Surtain. You have Rashee Rice, might see a lot of Marlon Humphrey. You got, obviously George Pickens going to see a lot of the Atlanta secondary. So AJ Terrell. And then you got, obviously T. Higgins might have a matchup there with Christian Gonzalez if they're moving Jamar Chase around the lineup, which they've been talking about doing. So some bad matchups here, but then also some upside that I think that they could finish in the wide receiver 2 land, maybe even wide receiver 1 land. Just a little bit more risk built into this wide receiver 3 category overall in general. A lot of players I like here, but whether it's matchup, situation, just uncertainty at the position, the reason why I have him here in this tier 3. Tier 4. Jackson Smith and Jigba going up against Denver. I actually like him a lot. He's just in this tier for me. Zay Flowers against KC. Christian Kirk at Miami. Keenan Allen versus Tennessee. Deontay Johnson at New Orleans. Tank Dell at Indy. Xavier Worthy at Baltimore. So a couple things I want to know here. Zay Flowers, probably going to see a lot of Trent McDuffie there on the other side. Obviously one of the elite corners in the game. Not sure if he's lining up on the outside this year. I know he played a lot of slot last year. Zay Flowers played a lot of slot last year. I'm sure they're probably going to see a lot of each other. Yeah, Keenan Allen in this tier, and this is probably a little bit of disrespect to Keenan Allen, but this is that prove it land again, right? Is he going to see L'Jarius Sneed on the outside, or is that going to be DJ Moore, which I'm kind of assuming is a possibility there. So is the upside there for Keenan Allen this week? Does Caleb look like a starter? Does he look like a rookie this week? Just kind of playing that out, playing it a little safer with Keenan Allen here, with some safer options ahead of him. Like I said, I really like JSN, especially if we are getting a Patrick Surtain matchup with DK Metcalf on the outside. JSN to me has a little bit of potential here to prove that he could be a high-end wide receiver for this for that offense. And then the back end of this tier, full of some questionable players with high upside. Christian Watson at Philly, Jameson Williams versus the Rams, Romo Dunze versus Tennessee, Brian Thomas at Miami, D-Hop at Chicago. So I think just question marks overall. Is Christian Watson ready to go? Is the Jameson Williams hype? Is it too much hype, or can he have the explosive nature of what we were expecting? Is Romo Dunze going to be a 1C in this offense, or is he a distant second or third? Brian Thomas, what's his role behind Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram? We like him, but is he going to show on the field in the shootout? And then DeAndre Hopkins, is he fully healthy, ready to go? Is he limited in any way against Chicago? So just some questionable things here in this 4th tier, and that's the reason why I don't have him in the 3rd tier. And then I don't want to get I'm going to go into a 5th tier. I don't want to get into the 6th and 7th tier, but in this 5th tier here, I have Cortland Sutton at Seattle, Jacoby Myers at the Chargers, Rashad Bateman at KC, Jordan Addison at the Giants, Khalil Shakir versus Arizona, Tyler Lockett versus Denver, Joshua Palmer versus the Raiders, Romeo Doubs at Philly. He's dealing with an injury. Rashid Shaheed versus Carolina, Adonai Mitchell, AD Mitchell, Adonai Mitchell versus Houston, Jerry Jeudy versus Dallas. So some players we like. I think if you're starting to get to the outside of this, we're probably talking 16-team leagues with deep rosters. So I'm going to avoid that for now, but those are the tiers that I have for receivers, okay? Those are the tiers I have for